Hi everyone, I'm Whitney and I post a new sewing related video here on my YouTube channel every single Wednesday. Today's video is all about the Star Wars quilt that I just finished making. I am so excited about it. I am still on that I just finished a quilt feeling. So while I'm still so excited about it, I wanted to go ahead and do a video for you all to show you kind of some of the little highlights and things that I incorporated into this quilt. So the first thing you'll probably notice is that it is the same design layout as my last DIY inspiration quilt. The quilt that my mom made for my daughter Skylar. And in that video I actually mentioned that I was starting a new quilt and had accidentally created the same design as her. But that's okay. It's a good design. So what I did was fussy cut feature blocks out of Star Wars fabrics and then made pinwheels, and I alternated them. Now the Star Wars fabric, well, all the fabrics are from my stash because I'm doing a Sew Your Stash challenge this year, and that there's a whole playlist that I'll link right up here all about it. And then there's also a Facebook group that has like 10,000 members in it, and they're all working to sew their stash, and you can find a link to that group in the description box down below. But in one of my Sew Your Stash videos, I talked about finding some fabric in my sewing room that I had forgot I even owned. And the fabric, I didn't really care much for the fabric. So what I did was I did a trade with one of the ladies in the group. And so in exchange, I got some Star Wars fabrics, and I was planning on using them for some projects for my husband. He's really into Star Wars. So I did start a quilt for him. It's a paper pieced quilt, and it's going to take a little while because paper piecing is more in depth. And in the meantime, I decided to start this quilt because I still had a lot of fabric left. I actually still have this much fabric left. So I decided to start this project in particular because it is for a charity auction that is going to be taking place in December. It's the Star Wars group that my husband belongs to, and they do a charity auction, and all of the funds raised go to the local children's hospital. And so I thought that was a really great cause, and last year I donated a Star Wars apron that I had made, and so I wanted to do a bigger project this year because I had more time in advance to work on something. So I decided to go with a quilt, and I also needed to practice making pinwheels for another project that I'm working on, so I thought, why not incorporate them? So I will have a video coming up very soon showing how to make perfect pinwheels. I am pretty new at making pinwheels, and I've already gotten compliments on how perfect mine are. So this is the second or third pinwheel I've ever made, and my points are perfect on it. And so in the video that's coming up, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that, to have perfect points in your pinwheels, and they'll just be quilt blocks that you can be so proud of. And then I'm also going to have a video coming up showing how I quilt my pinwheels. I do straight line quilting on all my projects just because I'm not practiced at doing free motion yet. But I figured out a design on how I could quilt just inside every section of the pinwheel and have it all be just one straight, one stitching line. And I'm sure other people have figured this out long ago, but for anyone who doesn't already know how to do it, I'm going to have a video coming on that soon. So anyway, so that is the front of the quilt, the feature blocks and the pinwheels. And then for the backing, the quilt is about 40 inches wide, and so for the backing, if you just got yardage off of the bolt, it would be basically the same size as the quilt top. And you need your backing to be a little bit wider than your quilt top. So what I like to do, which I did on this quilt over here, is I cut the lining fabric just in a straight line from top to bottom, and then I insert a section that uses some of the same fabrics as the quilt top. Now I do have a video all about this quilt over here, how to make it, and then a video showing some of the extras like that, like the backing and the binding and all that. I'll link to both of those right up here. you'll definitely find them interesting, and you can see the whole quilt backing in that video. So I did decide to do the same kind of thing for this quilt. So I picked out my backing fabric, and I chose this fun fabric because it made me think of the TIE fighters. And then I just used a rotary cutter and a ruler to cut right up the backing. And I inserted 4 different fabrics that were used on the front. I just cut 6.5 inch wide by various lengths out of the leftover fabric, and I pieced those together in one strip and then pieced it to the backing fabric. And it just adds a little something. It makes the quilt look more custom, more just higher end almost, because it looks like more thought went into it. And really what I'm trying to do is just save on yardage, because I did have to buy the backing fabric. I didn't have enough of any fabric in my stash that coordinated with the front of the quilt, so I bought 2 yards for the backing, and then I just added that strip in, and it was wide enough, and made it about 6 inches wider than the quilt top, which is what you need. And I showed it to my husband, and he was like, "I love what you did to the backing. That is really cool." And I was like, "Thanks." I was trying to save fabric. But to people who don't know that you're just trying to be conservative with your fabric, they think it's just an added design feature. So I love doing that for projects that are like this size, which is, this is about like a crib size or lap size quilt. It's just a really interesting way to get a wide enough backing and also incorporate a few more of your fabrics. Now, the only part of this quilt that I'm not super in love with is the border. Now, I am a huge fan of borders because they just add a nice frame to quilts. They also can disguise, if you have any issues with your binding at all, a border can disguise that. My only part that I don't like is my quilting in the border. My lines are not straight, and they're in gray, and they show up a lot in person. So I'm thinking about going back and taking out the 2 lines of quilting in the border and re-quilting it in black thread. I might do that. I haven't decided for sure. But either way, this is still my best quilting. Excluding the border, this is the best quilting I've ever done, and I'm super proud of it. There are no like gathers or pleats or bubbles or anything in the backing. I'm so proud of it. And from start to finish, this quilt took me 1 week. Now, my very first quilt I ever made took me took me 16 years to finish. I started when I was 14. And I finished it earlier this year. Now, I've made other quilts in between, but even my quickest one of those, like this one, took me a couple months because I made the top and then I set it aside for a while and waited to do the quilting. So this quilt was the first one that I pieced the top and then immediately quilted. And like I said, it took me a week, and I figured up it was about 25 working hours involved in the quilt. I don't know if that's good or bad. I've never figured up working time before, but just to give you an idea, this crib size quilt with feature blocks and pinwheels alternating was about 25 hours of working time for me personally. That is going to vary for every single person. But yeah, so like I said, I just finished it. So I just finished adding this binding about 20 minutes ago, and I could not be happier with it. So yeah, I'm so excited. It just feels so good anytime you finish a quilt and knowing that it's going to someone who's going to love it, because they're going to be purchasing it in a charity auction, and not only are they going to be purchasing it for themselves, but they're going to know that the money they spent on it is also going to a good cause as well. So I am just very excited for this to go in the charity auction and go to someone who loves it. So yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and found some part of it inspirational. And like I said, I've got some videos already linked up here, and then I have the pinwheel videos that are coming soon. If you want to see more of my quilting videos, I'm going to have a whole playlist of them linked right over here to the side. And that way you can get some other inspiration, see some of my actual quilt tutorials and things like that. And then if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, make sure to do so by clicking my picture right down there. And I'll be back next Wednesday with another new video. Until then, happy sewing!